run down, and that's the problem. The village of Silver Creek lost so many mom and pop businesses, it's the saddest thing. And it used to be a beautiful little hallmark community. So I think we have a big problem that we don't want to have happen here. If you restrict short-term rentals, if people can't afford their property and have to rent it out long-term, you really stand a risk, and I don't think you realize that.
Okay.
Thank you.
My name is Adam Dye. I own a business in Castaneda right now, and soon opening up a business at Four Corners. On this particular issue, I think for myself and my businesses that I own, that short-term rentals bring a great revenue. I do think there should be rules and regulations. I don't feel as though it's fair to cut everybody off, like people who are, we got a year and a half and you guys can't, do this because you're going to hurt construction, you're going to hurt us as a business, JoJo's, Quickbill, you name it. Also, I'd like to speak really quickly on behalf of some of the board members that I've ran into issues and have a problem with their character, I guess. You were in my business without my permission, giving my inspector a hard time.
You need to stick to the
This is exactly about the topic, it adjusts his character. You, on the other hand, I called you twice in regards to an issue I had in the no phone call, and the third time I had to call you to get an addressed issue. My point is I don't know why he is in my building. He has nothing to do with the inspector. He has nothing to do with anything, and you definitely don't have the right to come in my business and give my electrician and his inspector a hard time when he has more certifications than you do and knows more than you do as far as code and all this other stuff. That being said, on the record, I'm telling you right now, you are not to be in my business at all for any reason.
What's your opinion on the consortium?
What is my opinion on it? I think it's a great thing for the community. It brings in revenue for small businesses, and I think there needs to be regulations on it. And I'm
Your
fine with
opinion
it.
on the moratorium?
I'm against the moratorium.
Okay. Thank you.
Jeannie McCrell, 272 Dale Drive. Unfortunately, my husband couldn't be here this evening, but we wrote a letter. I believe we emailed it to everybody on the board, but I will submit a hard copy at the end. I will just summarize it instead of reading it. We're totally against the moratorium. This village needs people to come here. I sat and listened to a meeting the other night of a couple that moved here because they stayed in an Airbnb. I thought that was amazing. You take that away from people, who's going to want to come here? My children don't want to come here because there is nothing to do. There is not a business. And it's just, there's nothing for them. If we die, they get our house. We have put so much money, so much effort into that property to make it beautiful for this village. They won't be able to afford it because we put more money than we possibly could get back in return. You are taking people's property rights away from them. Let them do as they see fit. There has not been any troubles, no police reports. Everybody that I've met through Airbnbs, like I've met people staying at Rodney's house, at Kim's house, they have been super pleasant people. I would love to see them long-term say, oh my God, this would be a great place to come and retire and live. But if you're excluding that out, who's going to find this great village? We lucked into it 20 years ago because my mother-in-law was selling her property. That's the only reason we moved here. And at first I regretted it. I have come to love it. And we spend the majority of our time here. So even I don't have any, right now, thinking of having an Airbnb, but maybe when I'm older and we want to travel and we're gone certain parts of the year, I don't want my property to fall in disarray like some of these properties do. You're also being very short-sighted that other towns have pending litigation on this. And what's going to happen is this is probably going to go to pending litigation. How much of our tax dollars are going to have to go to that? How much are they going to be raised by to support something that it seems a lot of this village is not in favor of? So I just think that you really need to look closely at that because I honestly think you're not getting very sound legal advice. And this is also coming from my husband, who is an attorney, so I don't want to hear, I don't know what I'm talking about, or we don't know what we're talking about. He does, and he has told me about it. I'm an intelligent person, I can listen to what he has to say, but I feel like, as Sean said, legal advice has not been the greatest if you're proposing a moratorium with not clear language for the village. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
You want to include the paper,
Do you want it right now, or should I give it at the end of the meeting?
just so we get it?
Yeah, I'll give it at the end of the meeting.
Hi,
Yes.
I'm Judy Gardensarak, 182 Dale Drive, new resident, was able to afford a house. Yay! Sorry I didn't bring children, but I'm trying to recruit my son to move here with us. I'm here tonight along with, I think, probably all of us, doing our civic duty, right? This is how you have good government. You do your civic duty. You show up when you have better things to do. So I commend us all for being here, the board for being here. This is what civic duty is. In no way should my comments be interpreted as a lack of appreciation for others' times or efforts on behalf of the village. I'm saying this because I've heard a lot about, but they do so much, they do so much. I don't think anybody's criticism or opinions are about someone not doing enough or not caring enough. My statements are based on my observations and my research and the documents of the village that guided me in the state of New York. And I've attached them in the links inside my written emails, and I'll leave my paper. Just so everyone knows, there's a beautiful document from the Comptroller of New York State on the ethics of local government, a model code for the ethics of local government. Great read. Has question and answers, and there's some that are very pertinent. I also read the organizational meeting minutes from December 4th, 2019, when the mayor took his oath of office, and his comments that day that he chose to make were specifically about the ethics, the village ethics, and having the trustees sign that, and also about having a board appointed, an ethics board. I'm not sure if that was ever done or not, and if not, why.
Yes.
Did it serve? It was done? They meet, there is one. I didn't find anything on the web, on the village site. That might be my lack of clicking around, but I also did notice that nothing has been updated to the village local law in the last 10 years. Not a darn thing in there. Some of my concerns that I've observed, and they're really ethical concerns, and I think that's why we're here about this moratorium, is because of the ethics of this group. Which means that maybe the citizens of this community don't care about the ethics or holding people accountable to the ethics, because that's why people can do it. I've observed citizens be labeled, concerned citizens labeled as a campaign of misinformation, but yet I haven't heard any misinformation. I've heard differing opinions. I don't think anybody was confused about what a moratorium means from the get-go of that meeting on July 15th. Multiple zoning members commented and agreed that the proposed language of the short-term rental moratorium was problematic and not appropriate for Cassadaga. Yet as a committee, they recommended to the village board to enact it. I find that to be poor quality work. Nothing to be revered, I guess. Members of the zoning committee meeting, the standards of the zoning committee
Can you
members, they
summarize?
meet, pardon me?
Can you summarize? You have 3 minutes or
Wow, that went fast. Village employees, which everyone is, there's a lot of conflicts of interest. Mark Wilson at the meeting only mentions about his sports, his private business. That's not correct. He shouldn't be talking during a village meeting about, somebody else can speak about an event that's coming to the community, but not Mark Wilson. No one in this board should be voting on another member of their family's pay raise if that's happened in the past. There's just a lot of things that are kind of icky to me as a newcomer to your community.
Okay, thank you.
Bob Ruther, I'm here representing my daughter Madison, who owns property at 231 Dale Drive. And I just want to make just a few brief comments. There is no law on the books concerning short-term rentals that are not owner-occupied. In fact, the definition of a boarding house from the Cassadaga zoning code is any single-family dwelling unit lived in by a family, where for compensation guest room lodging is provided, lived in by a family. The term boarding house shall include rooming house, lodging house, bed and breakfast, and any other similar terms. So there is in fact something in the code. There is nothing for non-owner occupied residences, which means you cannot have them. If you have a single-family dwelling that qualifies as a boarding house, you have the right to go in front of the ZBA and ask for a special use permit. That is how you get authorized under zoning. Owner-occupied house. My suggestion would be for the committee to define exactly what an owner-occupied house is. A month, 6 months, 9 months, whatever. The other thing I'd like to bring to your attention also in the zoning is the Zoning Board of Appeals has absolutely no power to amend the zoning law. It must exercise great care to ensure that its rulings do not, in effect, amend the zoning law. So should a non-owner occupied person come before this board and ask for a special use permit to run an Airbnb, the ZBA cannot hear that appeal. Because by doing that, it would change the language of the definition of an owner-occupied house to also include a non-owner occupied house. And that is simply illegal. It can't be done. So to the zoning committee, there's some cleanup work you need to do. If you are an owner-occupied house and get your special use permit, you're good to go. If you are a non-owner occupied house, there's nothing you can do until these laws are changed. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Hi, good evening, everybody. You probably don't recognize me because I haven't been here off and on yet. If you don't, my name's Jeff Kozak. I'm the owner of 74 Maple, where my family has owned since 1967, and we've been members of this community, and I do think that we're members of this community for 55 years. I'm here today to express my concerns with the very divisive motion that's in front of you to enact a moratorium suspending short-term rentals with minimal input from the community. That's why you're seeing such a large crowd today. I'm concerned as a military veteran of 30 years that the Board of Trustees are considering taking away a freedom that I swore to support and defend. I'm concerned that it was only after information leaked out in June that it became a much larger issue, and the STRs have been closed-door discussed, possibly as early as November of last year on the paperwork that I've seen. I'm concerned with the recommendation for a moratorium by the Zone Planning Committee that is in direct conflict with an updated comprehensive plan approved by Chautauqua County and the Board of Trustees that sit in front of us. I'm concerned with the blatant disrespect of community members up there and in the crowd that we can't agree to disagree and have an intelligent conversation where we can be constructive. I'm concerned with the majority of the community is not being heard or being regarded. To make this point, I'd like to ask everybody in the audience that's in favor of no moratorium to stand up right now.
No more.
Thank you. I am concerned if you continue to proceed on this path, things are going to get much worse before they get better. In this community, you will be further divided. I have a choice to live here or not live here. We have chose to live here. Don't make us rethink it. I respectfully ask the Board of Trustees to take the opportunity to lead this community, to work together on short-term rentals. This can easily be done by tabling this moratorium and allowing the committee to do the work that they need to do to get the provisions in place. I greatly appreciate your time and your consideration in this respect.
on this board is gonna thank that man for his service to our country, I vote right now.
Nobody else got anything to say, I was standing for a minute.
Sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead,
Okay.
I'll go after you.
Ken Ulrich, I live at 9650 Last Road in Clarence Center. In full transparency, I own an Airbnb. I'm no place in Massachusetts. I just want to go on the record saying right from the beginning that I'm against the moratorium. I'm really against the moratorium from the standpoint of the process that I've observed. And some people have kind of lit on the issue of conflicts of interest, but I'm more interested in the process. And from some of the stuff that I've read, it seems to be a matter of public record. Elected officials and the people that they appoint on committees are supposed to act in a fiduciary capacity in the best interest of their own constituency that they're representing. And when they do that, they can't put their own self-interest first. And I've heard a couple of what I interpret as conflicts of interest presented. I don't understand how people can be voting on an issue when they own an Airbnb themselves. That's an inherent conflict right there. Regardless of which side you look at, it's a bias from both sides. I actually heard statements saying that I don't want another Airbnb on my street. That shouldn't even be a real consideration of somebody that's serving in a fiduciary capacity. Their interests aren't what they're concerned with. It's the interests of the people that they serve. So since the board doesn't have to answer to any specific questions, I'm just interested from the village attorney standpoint. Somebody made some comments earlier about the code of ethics. There's some inherent conflicts of interest here for people that are serving roles on both the committee and the board. So to go back to the questions earlier, what has been done about that issue? What's being done about that issue to give them counsel with regard to the correct process to be making decisions like they're making right now, which obviously have a lot of people fired up about the issues, the process, how you're going about it, the transparency of the issues. So can you speak to the code of ethics? Because I read it for municipal employees or municipal board members in the state of New York. They're pretty clear. And resolution of conflicts of interest is pretty clear. You don't have to be an attorney to interpret that. So from my perspective, I wish you could speak to that issue and how it's being dealt with in terms of the process that's going on here.
Sure, I got it, I don't know.
So the zoning committee, not to be confused with the zoning board of appeals. They're not elected, they're not in government, they do not own a fiduciary duty. They are a steering committee that gives recommendations to the board, who ultimately votes on the decision.
Respectfully, if I could make a comment though, the board has a responsibility for the people that are on that committee making those decisions, making recommendations to them.
They're not making decisions, right? They're making recommendations. So,
But the board is responsible for appointing that committee, so therefore they have an inherent responsibility to make sure those people serving don't have a conflict.
so I respectfully disagree. You want to hear both sides, right? So we'll take any concept. Let's say it's what you want to do on Main Street. You want pro-business people on there. You want non-business. You don't want to put people that are all aligned in one idea so they come to the board with one uniform. You want to put a steering committee together of not all like-minded individuals. You want decisions to come from everywhere, comments to come from everywhere, all walks of life, people, low income, high income, Airbnb owners, non-Airbnb owners. Because how else are they going to come to a collective compromise to present to the village? So no, on the committee level, especially the non-ZBA, it's a steering committee giving recommendations. You welcome that level of bias and unbiased. You want that. Now, when it ultimately comes before the board for a vote, each of them does have an ethical and a fiduciary responsibility to disclose any conflicts. Then there's a process in which by you weigh whether or not it's a legal conflict in which they have to abstain. Because this has not come before a vote, they have under no ethical obligation at the moment to articulate their conflict. Now, if they ultimately decide to vote on it, and if they feel they have a conflict, then obviously it needs to be disclosed. And they all go through training to the extent of it. If you're asking my opinions to the board, it's premature. I have not heard anything. I don't think any of them are Airbnb owners, and nor would I. And I anticipate if we get to a vote, eventually, one way or the other, if it was an Airbnb decision and one of them was Airbnb, that they would preclude themselves from the decision. But it's a little bit premature at this point. But the zoning committee has no standing. And for the record, just to address that comment and others, right? I do not represent the zoning committee.
Right.
I do not give them advice. In fact, I've spoken to one of them today and said, or in the past, said, listen, I don't give you advice because we don't have attorney-client privilege. I have it with the boards in their fiduciary capacity. I don't have it with the zoning committee. They're an independent committee designed to give information to them, right? So when the board conveys information to them and says, for example, I want a short-term moratorium, I say, okay, what do we want it for? I draft the language. I then send the law to the board to discuss. The zoning committee comes, they offer their feedback based on the proposed law, and we go back to the drawing board, if that's what was called for. But I don't interact directly with them. I don't attend their meetings. I don't get asked questions from them because I am not their counsel. I'm these five.
Just to add to that, we would encourage the zoning committee to have diversity. And if we said we didn't want anybody that owned a B&B on the zoning revision committee, I think we would be missing something. We certainly want to include that part of it because they are not the decision makers. We are. Yes.
All right. Brad Blizzard, I've lived here